Hello, hello, everyone. Today is March 15th. This is a meeting of the Inclusive Naming Initiative open source Workstream. This is a meeting that is recorded and will be available on the internet later, so please be mindful of what you say and do. Please be sure to be awesome to your fellow meeting attendees. We have a few things on the agenda, or we have one very specific thing on the agenda. The first, I will drop a quick PSA. Please note that, and this is not just for inclusive naming, this is just kind of in general. Please note that as of Sunday and going into, I believe, the end of the month, we will be dealing with fun stuff with daylight savings time. So just be kind to your colleagues on like meeting scheduling and weirdness. I ended up with a conflict today that I was not expecting, and it wasn't on my calendar. It didn't become a conflict on my calendar until Sunday. Uh, so just note if you see any meeting weirdness on our side or in the projects that you work in, just let us know and we'll try to help out. Um, Especially for your EMEA colleagues if you're on the US side, and for your US colleagues if you're on the EMEA side. Yeah, and Celeste, over to you.
Hi. So our big meeting agenda topic today is figuring out what we want this work stream to do, figuring out what we'd like to deliver, and to scope that even further, figuring out what we'd like to deliver a little bit more immediately, kind of towards Q2, like end of Q2. The way this has worked in other work streams so far is we're kind of deciding on a set of documentation or deliverables that this group is going to take responsibility for writing. So I think for now, what I'd like to do is to open up the floor and ask everyone here what you hope that we're going to accomplish. And then we can kind of spend a bit of time towards the end of the meeting sorting out what we think the most important bits are.
So maybe one suggestion: do we have the standards slides close at hand?
I
Because
can have those close at hand.
do or don't.
I also maybe feel like in the last meeting we did this. We did
Okay.
introductions and what you want to get out of the initiative. Or
Right.
we could do it again, maybe if we have different people.
So yeah, we did very specifically introductions. This time we should do deliverables. So, and I think that it's really important that we, again, the reason that we're all together is to make sure that we don't duplicate work. And the reason for existence for the pillar work streams, so community, company, enterprise, SDO, as well as open source, is that we would be doing the same thing in that particular venue, right? So my point for suggesting looking through the deck for standards is that we're starting to generate ideas kind of as a group, not just within this work stream, and we should make sure that if some people have good ideas already, we can steal them.
Okay, so I've pulled those up, and apologies because they are PowerPoint slides, and I'm on a Mac, so we're dealing with Keynote. I am going to share my screen, I guess, and to back up and fully explain this for everybody on the call, the standards work stream very kindly put together a slide deck for their meeting. And so what I'm hoping we can do is review their slide deck, see if there's anything we want to steal, and then go from there. So they sort of start with marketing and messaging goals and deliverables. What they're concerned about is asking the SDOs for a public statement of support and supporting the SDOs in marketing that they are following a certain set of guidelines that we are defining as a group. Do we feel like there's relevance here for the open source workstream? Are these things we need to do?
I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
I did want to jump ahead, but I do believe that a lot of what is stated here, definitely around. I would, so we've started this conversation in Kubernetes as well. So I have an email out to steering around kind of two things, right? One is bringing the Kubernetes working group naming into these meetings and having this meeting act as the satisfying the meeting requirement for Kubernetes, right? Because we have to meet on a certain cadence, but it's very clear that we're doing some similar things, right? The second part is the second part to that email was I would like the project to visibly note that we are a part of this effort, and that eventually, the intent would be to ship the docs from this effort into Kubernetes instead of having docs that we've developed from Kubernetes and doing it the other way around. So yes, is the short version.
So I'm just going to take notes in that because this is the language around this is a little SDO specific. That what we're hoping for the open source workstream is for projects to have some way of signaling their adherence or their commitment to a minimum set of language best practices, slash a way for them to note that they're a part of this effort.
So if I can do this as well, but if we can get a note taker so that while Celeste is sharing her screen, she doesn't also have to be taking notes. And
Okay.
just pop your name up in the note taker section.
So the second piece that they're looking for in the SDO workstream is an outreach piece and sort of having like liaisons. Any thoughts?
I have a thought. My first thought is that unless we know people in these orgs, it's going to be kind of hard to engage with them. Does that make sense? Yeah. Right? Like this is a very not new idea, but it is a very, big shift kind of idea, right? So just blatantly going out and being like, hey, IEEE, what do you think? It's literally like they would say, okay, put it in an RFC and do all this other stuff, I feel like. And I don't know if that's the case or not. If we know some folks.
Sorry to maybe reframe. So we're going to take we're stealing their deck a little bit right now, but like for the context of this work stream, it would be for open source projects, right? So okay. Like the people in the SDO work stream have those relationships, so they can foster that on the SDO side. But for us, we're stewards of open source projects, several of us, and I think that maybe it would be worthwhile to figure out which hats all of us hold, and which projects we can engage with effectively.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
So where I think this is going to be slightly different for open source rather than the SDO workstream, and just to also clarify, we're looking at their slide deck to make sure that we're in alignment with them and that we're not all heading in divergent directions. Where I think this is going to be different from an open source perspective is there is near infinite numbers of open source projects, and we're not going to have representation. In this room for every single one, we're not going to have representation in the broader group for every single major open source project. And so I think it's very reasonable to expect that the SDOs, because there are a fairly limited number of bodies, would form kind of strong liaison relationships. Where I think the open source workstream is a bit different is that we need to focus more on projects coming to us. Because we're not going to be able to reach into every single project individually and handhold. I think we can focus on seeding a few relationships based on who's in this room to lend credence. But I think what we need to set ourselves up for is allowing projects to come to us and say, we're doing this.
Was there also still the onboarding work stream though? Does that overlap with? Sorry.
No, it's cool.
Caught me. You caught me. Yes. So the community and tooling work stream is formerly known as intake. Yeah. So the idea for that work stream is to welcome new contributors as well as welcome new contributions. So there is for sure an overlap. So from the kind of framework of the work streams, that exists as a horizontal or program level work stream where the intent is that it would help each of them.
Yeah, so it'll deal with intake for multiple of the, I understand now. Thank you.
Right. So our job as a pillar specific work stream is that we would bring them the requirements of like maybe how you need to or how to help engage with these communities, right? So I think maybe a good example is you take like Dawn and I, we participate in CNCF SIG contributor strategy, right? And that has from there you have access to multiple CNCF projects to reach out. So yeah, I think it's going to be a bit of both in terms of like making sure that everything that we're talking about across these pillar work streams gets into the community and tooling work stream to provide essentially like the one-stop shop doc that says,
right,
hey, are you a this, right? And then go here, right? Go here for more information. So we want, hopefully that one place, and that's why we kind of want to make sure that like all of the pillar work streams are thinking about the same stuff, and we're ruthlessly stealing from their slide deck.
Yeah. So, oh, Joanna, you are an interesting. So their last kind of slide before they jump into like Administravia is forum for discussion / collaboration, and kind of like ways that those work streams can get together and like share best practices and like. I don't know if there's relevance for us here.
So I would say there is, right?
Okay.
I mean, the suggestion that an inclusive naming summit might exist, I would expect representation from all of the pillars and not just SEO. So it sounds like we need to have a group discussion on the community call about what a inclusive naming summit might look like.
I was just about to ask that. What would an inclusive naming summit look like?
Yeah, I was like,
I have no idea.
I was like, this is my first read of the deck, so
Yeah.
I was like, oh, a new thing. Okay.
Yeah. So again, the deck kind of drives into Administravia from here on in. So I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen if we're cool with that. Do you want me to start sharing again, Stephen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I feel like we're going to discover some more nuggets that we didn't know about.
Okay. It moves into meetings and communication, what they want their cadence to be. And then they talk specifically about Mallory Nodal's draft, which was expiring shortly before their first meeting. And recruiting is
okay, fair.
Okay, I respect.
I mean, that does bring up some points though, right?
Yeah.
So the, brainstorming about how we want to collaborate is one. So, collaboration and inclusive naming summit. And what else did I miss? There was some, hold on, I'm going to pull up the deck. Right, the draft. So at this point, I believe the draft has expired.
Jeez.
Or may have expired. So this brings up, so one of the things that Mallory was looking for was shows of support, right? And this kind of ties into being able to commit to working with the inclusive naming initiative or being a part of the inclusive naming initiative. So I think we should at some point check in with her and see, because I believe last week was the all week of IETF meetings.
Mm.
I just put the link in chat, the 5th edition. It expires August 26th of this year. So there is time for us to gather support and do all the things.
Okay. Did this get
and yes, let's do that.
Yeah, I could have sworn she said it was. I mean, unless this is an updated expiry date.
It looks like it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I could have sworn she
It just entered February 22nd, 2021. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
All right, so I need to read this.
So and the link I put in the docs is the permanent link, and it should redirect to whatever the latest draft number is. It's currently draft 5. So
beautiful.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
So I think that we're starting to go down a path where we're collecting. Well, we all have ideas. We all have ideas about what the terminology may look like and what the process may look like to get terminology or just to have that conversation. It seems like we have a few issues up on the board for collection, essentially, of terms. This is, I think that we need to do a copy and paste situation because we've talked about it a few times, and I think each of the pillars have talked about it as well. Just link dumping of all the potential lists, even if this isn't a draft folder, and start to have a conversation around the pillars of what we might adopt and might not, and starting to convert that into. Yes, Celeste.
So we've talked about that in the language workstream, and I think that's we temporarily put a hold on the idea of like, let's ask the mailing list for like a link dump of every kind of set of recommendations that we know currently exists. And the reason that there's a bit of a hold on that right now is we're not sure. There's legal questions involved there, right? There's the question of like, basically, are we allowed to base our work off of other work that exists? I think if it exists publicly, that's a little less contentious a question, because then we can reference and say this is in reference to, or we acknowledge blank. Where that gets a little more difficult is for companies and participants in this initiative who have not publicly published some of this work. What then? So
sorry, the suggestion was to just start link dumping, and that kind of under the presumption that they're public links.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, do we know of any closed source things right now. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Yeah. Okay.
I think we all have our internal lists.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay, I see what you mean.
If I'm making a connection, is this related to the question that I brought up in the language work stream about people might be wanting to anonymize their lists and information and info dumps into the group?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
yeah.
around that. It's also around, if you think of it from the flip side of I am company X. I'm not necessarily, I'm like not an open source company. I'm not Google. I'm not publishing my own developer style guide, but we want to contribute what our internal guidelines are. And we want credit for having those internal guidelines.
Okay. Oh, I see.
So
yes.
there's like, it's both sides of that coin.
Right.
But I think you're right, Stephen. I think we can ask for known public contributions at this point. But I think that's a language work stream task to do.
So I personally feel it's all of our responsibility.
Okay.
Because this the IETF one is from is that I would be under the SDO venue, right? The Workstream SDO. But if you took the Kubernetes naming recommendations, then that's us, right? So I think that while the language Workstream should be responsible for putting the final list together, I don't think that should preclude each of the pillar work streams from trying to aggregate lists from their pillars. Like,
And it
when
makes
we help link dump for you so that you can pretty.
segment as needed. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Like a single source of link dumping is going to be better than multiples, if that makes sense, just from a logistics perspective.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So, by way of starting to wrap up, because we are about to hit time, we did some brainstorming last week, and I've highlighted a few kind of things that we were interested in actioning on there. And we did a bit more brainstorming this week, a little more focused on what our friends in the SDO workstream are doing. What's next?
Well, I'll shut up first. See if anyone else has opinions. I always have opinions.
Are you one of those people?
Okay. All right. Well, so I think that now that we are meeting, so one, again, be aware of the meeting times may be weird until the end of the month. But now that we're meeting, and now that we're kind of starting to spruce things up in the background, we need to start making project board work priority. So scanning, doing a board walk during these meetings, and figuring out or doing a board walk asynchronously, and figuring out if we maybe need to extend the length of this meeting to cover that. If we can manage to do it asynchronously, then no need. But a lot of what we're talking about is already written down on the board in multiple formats. So I think that one of our next things to do is things that are tagged for our work stream, or if they're not tagged for our work stream, then I need to create a label to make sure they're tagged for our work stream. And we should go forth, start assigning people things if we see that there are gaps based on this list that are not in the board, then we should get them on the board. We need to move from meeting notes into actionable and doneness, and figure out what our definition of done is for certain things.
Yeah, 100% agree. Now I wonder, I can do this, but I also want to ask if there's a volunteer who wants to kind of take these last 2 weeks of meeting notes and make sure that everything here is accurately reflected in an issue in inclusivenaming.org or inclusivenaming.org in GitHub. So if somebody's got kind of a spare 30 minutes in their week and wants to reconcile what we've written down with what exists in issues.
And for issues, I would also link, where is the top level thingamajig? Well, all right, so this is the top level project board as well. Should cover a few things. We can, as Karsten mentioned, hang out in Slack. Come join Slack, and if you're not already on Slack, I think most of you are. Come hang out, and we can try to do the boardwalk on Slack too, if someone decides to pick it up, and we can help clarify in Slack instead of the next meeting. All righty. Well, we are at time. Thank you all for hanging out, as always. We will catch you on a different place in the interwebs. Take it easy.
Right. Bye now.